Welcome to this section where we're going to be talking about the persistence and databases. We're going to see how can we connect to a DB, how can we connect our Spring Boot application to a DB. In this case, we're going to be using a PostgreSQL database. We're going to run it locally and we're going to connect our application to that DB, and we're going to save the products in the DB instead of using this static final list here. The first step before we can actually connect to a DB is we need to have some sort of DB running somewhere. In this case, that would be on our local machine. Now, there are a couple of ways of running PostgreSQL locally. One of the ways is to download PostgreSQL on your machine and run it. But the thing that we're going to be doing here, in this course, is going to be running it using Docker. So we can start it up as a container. We can stop it, we can create a new one, we can remove it quite easily. But before we can run it as a Docker container, we would first need to have Docker installed on our machine. Now, depending on your operating system, you can go to this URL here, so docs.docker.com/engine/install. And right here, you're going to have instructions for your operating system. So you're going to have instructions for Linux, for Mac, and for Windows. Now, I am on Windows, but I am using a Windows subsystem for Linux. So if you have Windows subsystem for Linux installed, you can go ahead and use this Linux tutorial right here. And you can use the Ubuntu tutorial to install Docker on your machine in the VSL, in the WSL. So in the WSL, you can technically install, if you have the Ubuntu distribution, you can install it using this tutorial right here. But if you don't have WSL, or if you're using some other OS, you can follow the instructions right here. So you have for macOS and you have Docker Desktop for Windows. So you could choose some of those instructions and you should have Docker running on your machine. Now, after you run Docker on your machine, you can come to the terminal. And this is the command that you can execute in order to start up your Docker DB. In this case, we are calling the Docker command with run. Now, depending on the way you've installed Docker, you might have to use sudo in front or maybe not, but that really depends on how you've installed and configured Docker. In my case, I don't have to use sudo. So I can do Docker run, and then I'm specifying a name for the container. In this case, I'm saying it's going to be tutorial DB. Then I'm specifying a variable, which is going to be the Postgres user. In this case, that's going to be equal to Postgres. Then I'm specifying another environment variable, which is going to be the Postgres password, which is still going to be Postgres in this case. And the port that I want this container to run on. So this is going to be the machine port and the port inside the container. For this, I'm going to keep both of them as the default PostgreSQL port, so 5432. And then the last parameter is out of what image we want to run this container. And in this case, that's the Postgres image. So if that's not locally on your machine, that's going to get pulled from Docker Hub. You're going to get the image locally and it's going to start up using that image. So if I execute this command, it's going to start up a Docker container with PostgreSQL running on port 5432 with the username Postgres and with the password Postgres. So if I click enter, that's gonna start running. Now, I did get this error because I do already have a DB running in the background. But if you are starting it for the first time, you're probably not gonna get that error. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do docker ps, and as you can see that I do have some DB running here. I'm gonna stop that one. So I'm gonna say docker stop, and I'm gonna stop that DB. And now I'm gonna start up or run the container again. So I'm just gonna go ahead and run this container. So docker start and the name of the container that we've just created previously. So previously it didn't start because there was already a already a PostgreSQL running, a PostgreSQL container. It was running on the same port and it couldn't really use that port. So it says port is already allocated, but now we're starting it up again. And now if I do docker ps again to see all the running containers, you can see that we do have a container that's running with the PostgreSQL image, and it is running on port 5432. That's getting mapped to the port 5432. And the name of the container tutorial DB, and that's up and running. So now locally we have locally we have PostgreSQL running as a Docker container. Currently on my machine it's running in WSL, so Windows Subsystem for Linux. But in your case, if you are using a different OS or if you're running it differently, if you have installed Docker, the process would be the same. So this would be the command that you can execute to run Docker. So that's going to be it for this video. In the next one, we're going to take a look at how can we access our DB using DB Manager tool. In this case, we're going to be using dbeaver. I'm going to show you how you can download it and how you can use it. But that's going to be it for this video right now.